as bad as the rest of Tamil Nadu.
Okay, we are live now.
Thank you, Rajan. Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us once again today at Tiffin Talks. Today we are going to discuss and have a talk with somebody who is at a very young age is now entering into the realm of a master storyteller. She has just come out with her 12th book, and today we're going to have a discussion with her on Kamadeva to Mohini, Desire in Ancient Indian Epics. And she'll be joined with none other than Kaveree Bamzai, a noted author and journalist herself. Kaveree, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Welcome to yet another edition of Tiffin Talks. I'm delighted to talk to Anuja Chandramouli, who's one of my favorite authors, tells her story so beautifully and simply, and is a great fund of information. Whenever I need anything at short notice to know anything about our epics, our myths, she's my go-to person. This is the book that she's just written. Her 11th or 12th?
11th book, my 11th.
It's called Mohini the Enchantress. It's by Rupa Publications. Thank you so much for joining us from Shivakasi, Anuja. I wanted to ask you right away about Mohini because she seems such an independent and liberated woman. And of course, she's also the mother of one of our most controversial deities, Shasta. So let's talk a little about Mohini right away.
Yeah, so Mohini, I think everyone's heard of Mohini. She's there in the churning of the ocean story, where Vishnu takes this feminine avatar to, entice and beguile the asuras into giving away the nectar of immortality. But here in the south, I think North Indians know that much about Mohini, but in the south we have a few more legends, especially in Kerala where, Sabrimala is there and everyone knows Mohini is the mother of Shasta. So we have a few more legends here about her, and I just wanted to explore it further because I think it's very, limiting when a woman is just portrayed as an enchantress, that all she has to do is use her powers of seduction to get her way.
Like Menika, we've seen Menika
like
as
Menika,
yes.
and Ramba and Urvashi, but actually their roles are a little bit more complicated than that. They are more complicated than that, and I just wanted to explore it some more and tell her story in her own words. So, it was quite interesting, and it was very nice to see that there's so much depth to Mohini, and it's not just about swaying her hips and smiling and enticing the men like that.
So talk a little about Shasta because he's, thanks to Sabrimala and the controversy, he's become really the object of so much attention and controversy.
Again with Shasta, it was a very unconventional birth for him because his parents, he's also called Harihara Putra because he was born of the union of Shiva and Mohini. Legend has it that Shiva was, deeply in love with Mohini and he chased her and, this child was born of this union and apparently, he was born for the purpose of slaying this female demoness, Mahishi. That's how the legend goes, and they also say that he was somewhat uncomfortable when he found out that his parents are both men. So I wanted to explore that legend a little bit because, I don't, even with the Sabrimala thing, I don't think, that we have these fixed ideas that God can be locked up in the sanctum sanctorum and, once the door is open, the devotee gets to actually see God. Faith is bigger than that. The gods cannot be tethered to temples contrary to popular belief. And I don't think Ayappa himself was too upset about how he was born. I think he was very chilled about it. I think this was a way of, establishing that, there's more than one gender, right? That transgenders, homosexual men, women, they can also produce children, not necessarily produce, they can have children. It's just Hindu mythology, Indian mythology making room to accommodate unconventional unions, basically.
But that's so interesting because if you look at almost all the families in our myths and our history, they're also dysfunctional. I mean, beginning with the Ramayana, going on to the Mahabharata, you don't have a single normal family. And yet we are told so much about family values. So, what was it? Was it a post facto rationalization? Because, in a way, I suppose the epics were reflecting society at that point.
You're right. You're right. Exactly. I think the epics hold a mirror to reality.
Yes,
And though we place a lot of emphasis on marriage and producing children and things like that, I think we all know that throughout history, when you bind a man and woman in holy matrimony, there are going to be issues. They've been messed up by their parents. They're going to mess up their children. So it's full of dysfunctional stories, and yet I think it was just supposed to be a way to get people to behave. Marriage actually, because
right.
again, while I was researching Mohini, I found that Hindu mythology does acknowledge that not marriage is not for everybody, which is why you had your gay men and your women, the transgenders, the intersex characters. They were acknowledged, and their activities were sort of regulated. They were included in society, and their activity was regulated. So basically the thing was to strike a balance that one size doesn't fit all. Everybody has different needs, and as long as you regulate your conduct, as long as you don't let your desires run away with you, it's fine to indulge your desires and live the life you want. But of course they encouraged marriage, and after that stage is you've produced your children, done your duty. Then the next step is they'd encourage celibacy and the ascetic mode of life. Basically there's a time and place for everything. Time for you to indulge your desires, a time for you to embrace convention, things like that. And interestingly enough, Vedic culture also suggested that transgenders, the intersex, the homosexuals be included in society as a check on population explosion, actually.
Right.
We
Right.
chose to forget that,
Yeah.
and we kept pushing the whole get married, produce children thing to the detriment of society, the environment at large. Overall.
And even when you look at our unions, some of the great unions in our myths, whether it's Shiva and Parvati, whether it's Radha and Krishna, as you were saying the other day, they're all very tumultuous. They're not, they're not sort of seamless or ideal. They all have their ups and downs. So talk a little about that as well. I find those fascinating.
It is very fascinating because now Shiva and Parvati together, they are worshipped as Ardhanarishvara.
Right.
It's supposed to be that state of blissful union.
The ideal union.
Exactly, a beautiful union. But again, with Radha, Krishna, Shiva, Parvati, the whole thing is that it's not meant to last. Love that intense, ironically, tends to burn itself out. I think every married couple will attest to that. Marriage is, more mundane. It's not entirely about romance. It's about companionship, shared goals, right? So again, the epics point out that love, intense romantic love, it's all well and good, just as long as you understand that it was never intended to last. So Parvati and Shiva, they were so dysfunctional that during one of their arguments, Shiva saw fit to decapitate his own son.
Yes. I
It
mean,
got that crazy.
how intense can that be? You can't get more intense.
It
than
doesn't
that.
get more intense than that. So again, it's just for us to understand that just to get a dose of reality actually, that we are not always. It's not always going to be a happily ever after where you walk away into the sunset. There will be problems, but you have to think of Ardhanarishvara as that ideal, for you to work towards.
So, do we have such an ideal in our epics? Have we come across an ideal union? Have you come across any such union?
And I think an ideal union is an oxymoron. It doesn't exist. But like I said, for brief periods, you have that transcendental happiness, and that would be Radha Krishna.
Yeah.
And but Radha Krishna again, it wasn't perfect if you think about it, because Radha was in a relationship. She was in a committed relationship. They say she was married, and for her, none of it mattered. None of those conventional bonds mattered to her. Her love for him kind of eclipsed everything else. And yet Krishna could not stay with her forever. He had to leave her behind and go forth to meet his destiny. So that's the whole point of Ras Leela, I guess. It's that they say it's worth experiencing it, even if it's very brief, and even if you're left with a broken heart after that.
And in a way, it also led to the whole bhakti tradition. Krishna was a god who could inspire such extreme devotion in people like Mirabai that they left everything and just sort of were, devoted to Krishna. What is it about Krishna that inspires such extreme devotion?
I think he's like the best character ever. He's a favorite of mine, and I think the thing about Krishna is that he respected women. He loved them, and see, a lot of people think that women want to be admired, praised about their looks or whatever. But I think ultimately women need respect. They need respect, and Krishna gave that. And again, I'm going to mention talk about Draupadi, the disrobing of Draupadi.
Yeah.
That horrible episode where stalwarts like Bhishma, Drona, none of them stopped it, and Krishna wasn't even there, and yet her faith in him was rewarded. Her love for Krishna, he didn't let her down. At that moment, he was there for her, and he was there for everyone who loved him, who cared enough for him. So that's the amazing thing about Krishna. I don't think anyone can resist him.
But also, I think the fact that he was a naughty child who grew up to be a wise god, there's also a journey that he undertakes. I mean, he's not just one-dimensional.
That's true. That's true. Again, he went from being this carefree child who had this softness for sweets and milk products. I think we can all identify with that.
Yeah.
And then, so that was his childhood, the halcyon days of his childhood. And even as a child, he slew his uncle Kamsa. Interestingly, with Kamsa was the child of rape, actually. Not many people know this.
Right.
But his mom was raped by an asura named Gobila. And, she tried to abort this child. And, it wasn't possible because the child was too tough, too resilient. So she cursed him and said that he will meet his end at the hands of a relative, a blood relative. And in a way, if you look at it, Krishna did set Kamsa free. Kamsa was born of a violent union. He was a very violent person whose life was marred by hatred and violence. So even then, with Krishna, it's always an act of love. So he liberated Kamsa, and that's when he grew up. He stopped being that carefree kid who loved sweets, who loved dancing with the gopis and playing, practical jokes. He had to grow up and go meet his destiny. He had to mastermind Kurukshetra. And his presence was felt on every inch of that battlefield. There was so much he did in his lifetime. So it's that arc. It's a beautiful arc for Krishna, and he also accepted Gandhari's curse when she said that he will die alone.
I was about to come. It's such a tragic end to such a wonderful God, isn't it? He has such a solitary fade out.
But again, he was completely unperturbed when Gandhari cursed him. That's again the beauty of Krishna. He treats everything with a certain equanimity.
Right.
He doesn't get too worked up. He's never too happy, sad, nothing of the sort, In fact, the only time he shows emotion is when he's worried for Arjuna. When Arjuna takes that oath to enter fire if he doesn't succeed in killing Jayadratha, who slew Abhimanyu. Krishna is worried at only that point, and he'll tell his charioteer, if Arjuna doesn't make it tomorrow, I will destroy the world. A world without Arjuna is not one I will allow to endure. That's when you see passion for his friend. Other than that, when Gandhari curses him and tells him he'll lose his entire family, his race, she says it will be a bloodbath. The Yadavas will destroy each other, and she'll say you'll die alone. Was so matter of fact and accepting about that. He said it's meant to be. That is fate, I accept it. So it's really amazing that he was so calm in the face of what we would see as a tragedy. He, on the other hand, saw it as inevitable, and he accepted his fate with so much grace. And it's something we should probably try to emulate, especially during the pandemic. Just calm down and not go nuts.
Anuja, I wanted to bring, some of the more general themes that all your works have explored. the fact that we do have so many instances of different genders, and I'd like you to give some examples, and how we've been so accepting of all kinds of things that we now are struggling to even find words for, like intersex, you know. So, talk a little about this variety of genders and this variety of sexualities that we have been living with through our histories and our epics. How amazing is that?
It truly is amazing, Kaveri, let me tell you. And only recently we decriminalized homosexuality.
Yes.
And it's so tragic because originally the ancient Vedic texts, before we were known as Hindus, which is an invader's term for those who live on the banks of the Indus
Right.
River,
Yeah.
right? So it's not what we were originally called. According to the Vedic culture, the Vedic texts, the third gender was acknowledged. There was a name for it in all the texts. It's called Tritiya Prakriti, the third gender,
Right.
where they include other those who aren't who don't conform to binary notion of sexuality. To give,
Right.
and there are lots of stories as well. You talked about the intersex,
Hmm.
and the intersex are those who have ambiguous genitalia, right?
Yeah.
And without knowing it, we worship them in that form. Ardhanarishwara is Shiva and Parvati. It's a hermaphroditic
Right.
deity which we worship.
Right.
There's a version of that for Vishnu as well.
Right.
Vishnu and Lakshmi is Vallabha Vardhini. And
Right.
we worship that form as well. Harihara Putra is worshipped. In Odisha, there's this temple, the Lingaraj temple,
Right.
where Hariharan are worshipped together, Shiva and Vishnu. So
Right.
those are examples of the intersex, and we also have sages like Varuna and Mitra, Agastya and Vashishta, highly respected sages. They were born of Varuna and Mitra. Of course,
Right.
they say that their seed was shed when Urvashi wandered that way.
Right.
But the point is, their fathers are Varuna and Mitra, who were very, very close at that time. So,
Right.
again, it's not they weren't born of a woman.
Right.
Even the Pandavas, in so many of the stories, none of
Exactly.
them have, conventional births. And there's a very, very interesting story about Vali and Sugriva
Yeah.
from the Ramayana.
Right.
Now they say that Aruni, who himself was only half formed
Yeah.
because his mum opened the egg before the egg hatched. So he
Right.
was only half formed. So the lower half of him is not defined. And Aruni became Surya's charioteer. And
Right.
one day, because of a curse, Surya could not rise and complete his journey across the sky. So Aruni had a day off for the first time in forever, I guess. He decided to go party in Indra's Sabha, and he was denied entrance because
Huh.
of his indiscriminate sexuality. So he decided to, take the form of a woman. And he goes to Indra's Sabha and he watches all the dancers there, and Indra falls in love with him.
Right.
And the child of their union is Bali. And
Right.
then Surya asks him, "Where the hell did you take off?" And he says, "This happened to me in Indra's Sabha." Surya's curious. He says, "Let me see the
Huh.
form which enchanted Indra, the
Right.
connoisseur of beautiful
Yeah.
women." And when Surya sees Aruni in that form, he also is enamored of Aruni, and the child of their union is Sugriva.
Riva.
So we have many stories like this. And Mohini herself, again, she's the feminine avatar of Vishnu. So there are like plenty of examples, and all the ancient texts talk about all these genders. And
Yeah.
it's interesting that there's no punishment prescribed for them in Dharma Shastra. They're
Right.
just told not to, marry against the grain, for them. It's just not advisable for them. So they work mainly as, they worked in the harems as makeup artists, hairstylists, dancers, musicians, and also as, prostitutes or courtesans. It
Yeah.
was not considered vulgar or ugly or anything of the sort. Very practical approach to the genders in our mythology. Just preaches a spirit of tolerance
Yes.
for those who are not like us.
Right. So, Anuja, how did you sort of embark on this ocean of discovery? I mean, was it stories that were told to you as a child, and then you did your own enormous amount of research? But how did it happen?
started with stories I heard as a child, and I fell in love with the
From your
stories.
mother or your
My grandmother, my
Okay.
grandmother. So she used to, in fact, the first story she told me was Krishna's,
Oh,
and
really?
he was like my childhood imaginary buddy, and I used to know that story by heart. So she used to like showing me off to anyone who visits, and she'll make me sit on the table, and I'll tell the story of how Kamsa grabbed Krishna by the newborn infants by the ankles and
Right.
bashed their brains out, and people would gasp, and so I was quite the drama queen, I guess, even as a child. And after that, I started reading Amar Chitra Katha comics, and my mom would scream at me the way today's parents scream at children who spend too much time on the iPad, right?
Right.
My mom will say, "You're anti-social. You're always reading, reading, reading." So I
Yeah.
used to spend the holidays with a book, and I'll have some snacks, which is not a very healthy practice.
Right.
Not good for the waistline at all. So I'll just snack and eat and read and read. So I've been reading this stuff from when I was a child, and I still love it. And believe me, you will never ever, you can't say I'm an expert on the Mahabharata or the Ramayana or the Indian mythology, because there's so much. Every time you read, it's an ocean out there. You
Right.
discover something new, and I just love that. I just love that. The research part is so much fun.
So do you read that in the original in translation? How do you do that?
Actually, I read the translations, I'm very grateful for those who've spent time translating the ancient text. It's very, very helpful for someone like me,
Right.
because again, you do explore regional folklore for this, because it's very, very, there's a richness of material there, especially Mohini. And in dance and music also, there's a lot of little stories which you probably just grow up hearing. Hanuman Chalisa and
Right.
Kanda Shashti Kavasam. You hear all this, and you kind of just, I don't like to focus on a literal translation. As a rule, I don't do that, because I feel that's so limiting. I like to soak in the essence.
Right.
So, if I'm researching Shakti, I used to just play the Devi Mahatmyam. Though
Right.
I don't understand it, I feel, sort of
Something
creates the mood.
something
Something soaks it.
dodges in
Yeah.
your
It's an
subconscious.
osmotic, it happens by osmosis,
Right.
I guess. It just seeps
Right.
in. So
Right.
I just try to, understand the essence. So I'm very, very, I can't underestimate the importance of music and dance and sculpture. Sometimes, when I'm just wandering around a temple, I hate, standing in the queue and getting shoved and all that stuff. So I like to just read the inscriptions and look at all the sculptures and the paintings, just soak it in, just get an idea of, the essence of what was tried to, of what was being conveyed actually since
Right.
ancient times.
I'll take a couple of questions, then we'll get back to our conversation. We've got quite a few. From Giridhan Vijay Kumar, any chance of you adding a third book to Yama's Lieutenant?
I've been meaning to do that, and initially there was some talk about making it as a TV show.
Yeah.
So that fell apart, I guess. So I kind of put that on the back burner. But maybe I will return to it someday. I always say that the stories choose me. I don't choose them. The stories and the characters. So maybe if they kind of reach out to me again, maybe it'll happen. Maybe. So I can't make any promises I can't keep, but hopefully it happens sooner rather than later.
What happened to the TV series that was supposed to be based on it?
So it's a very uncertain industry, no? I think as
Right.
an artist, you're prepared for that.
Right.
You wait some more, and just when you're going to sign the contract, it can all fall apart. Who the hell knows? And I think right now it's not very conducive for artists, right? With the lockdown and the pandemic, lots of things have been put on hold. So we just have to be patient and hope for the best and keep working on the next project. Otherwise, you're
Exactly.
definitely going to go nuts. So I
Right.
keep busy. Otherwise, really, I hate waiting. Patience is definitely not a virtue I possess. So for me, the solution is to move on to other things and just stay productive and
Right.
hope for the best. Hope something works out.
Um, uh, there's a question from Varsha. Any chance of getting a contemporary slice of life kind of book?
Then see, maybe not. Maybe I will do it someday. Maybe I'll just sit down and write about nothing. maybe something funny, whatever. But
Yeah.
I feel right now I've been trying to leave mythology and historical fiction behind actually
Why
and
is
try
that?
something else.
You do it so well.
It's very intense, no? It's very,
Yeah.
very intense, and it takes a lot out of you, I feel. So
Right.
sometimes even I'll think I'm just gonna write something funny and blah blah. But I feel, but every time I set out in that direction, suddenly one of these characters just takes
Falls
my
out to you.
head hostage, and I return to it, and I am not complaining because I love this world. It's a beautiful, beautiful world to explore, and I will do. Maybe I'll do it someday. Maybe I'll do it someday.
There's a question from Sonali Dabade. What do you recommend that people turn to learn more in depth about our Indian epics?
See, again, lots of parents also ask me this: how do I get my child to be
Yeah.
interested in Indian mythology? I'll say just don't make it some sort of exercise like I should know about my culture traditions, because children will immediately be like, leave me alone, I hate this
Right.
stuff. Just expose yourself to the stories, and whether I don't necessarily mean the TV shows, which can probably kill your taste for it, but just explore the books, surrender to it. When I'm doing research also, I feel like you're caught in the current of a river or something. Just explore, let it take you where it will. Explore the little known stories, just respect the material, keep returning to it. It's a very, very beautiful experience to just submerge yourself in Indian mythology. And there are so many exciting authors out there. You have Chitra Devakarni Banerjee, Devdutt Patnaik. He's a genius. He's really good. I would recommend Patnaik, and of course Anand Neelakantan,
Right.
Kavita Kane, all brilliant authors. They've done some amazing work. So just we pick up those books. It always helps to encourage us insecure authors, who have sleepless nights worrying whether reading is like a dying art, and whether we've lost readers to Netflix forever. So just pick up books and read.
Yeah. There's Shivansh AS. Any other works of historical fiction coming up? In fact, I was going to ask you that as well. Was Mohammed Bin Tughlaq the sole exception to your retellings of mythology? I don't think it was the sole one, but are you going to do more of historical fiction? Because Padmavati, we really don't know. Did she exist? Did she not exist? We don't know.
Yeah, she might as well have been a figment of the imagination. But I did do a book on Prithviraj Chauhan,
Prithviraj
so
Chauhan, yeah.
Chauhan, and so I've written 3 books on historical fiction. You can include Padmavati or not,
Yeah.
but I have been meaning to do some more work in that genre. I want to write about the South Indian kings, the Cholas, the
Yeah.
Pandyas.
Right.
Now, again, with the South, I feel it's a very ignored part of Indian
Absolutely.
history.
Yeah.
So we really need to discuss. And again, with the South, people probably know only Rajaraja Chola and the
Yeah.
Chola dynasty, but there were other great kingdoms down here. The Pandyas, which is close to where I live, their capital was Madurai, which is
Right.
just an hour's drive from here.
Right.
So I
And
have been meaning to,
and they were global in their expansion. I mean,
yes.
they were sort of international
Exactly, they'd
kings.
gone international. They were
Yeah.
seafarers. They
Yeah.
built mighty ships, and they were in very. They had this big flow of cash coming in from their imports
Right.
and exports, and
Right.
very, very interesting with these things. So I definitely want to do that someday. But
I
again, it's
think
going to be a massive project.
I think the Cholas, Pandyas, and Pallavas are perhaps some of the least explored dynasties
Exactly.
in our study, in our history. Why is that?
I think history tends to be Delhi centric, because Delhi has been a bastion of power since ancient times. And forget Delhi, most people assume that life begins and ends in the metros. People,
Exactly.
you think that India, consists of Bangalore, Chennai, Mumbai, and Delhi. There's a lot of other stuff there which we need to bring into the spotlight and be more inclusive. And people get history itself, people keep talking about how it's so dull and how there are so many names and dates, but I think history is fascinating. The
Right.
stories there are just brilliant, and I love doing historical research. But for another barrier is language.
Right.
Not a lot of the texts have been translated. I remember I was telling a Tamil journalist this. A lot of Tamilians get upset because I write in English, and they always say you should write in your mother tongue. And I say, blame my dad. Uh, he sent me to a convent school at the age of 5 where they taught us to speak the Queen's English. But, and I was telling this journalist, I would like to write a book on the Pandyas, the Cheras, the Pallavas. And he told me, good luck doing that if you can't read in Tamil. So, but Devi Yashodharan did write a book on the Cholas.
It was wonderful. And I think the way she was able to also show the kind of multiracial society that was created out of it. I think that was quite fascinating. That was one aspect that I had no idea about. But the Abyssinian slaves, and then the Greeks, the other Europeans. It's so fascinating, isn't it?
It's amazing, and I met her at the Think Edu Conclave actually,
Yes.
and we had this lovely chat over coffee. And she was telling me, don't listen to that journalist. Even I relied on translated material. There's plenty out there.
Yeah.
The rest we can always, interview people and get the information. It's just like about, I just have to make that commitment to go there and do the grunt work. And hopefully I'll stop being lazy, and I will
think you're
get the
anything
work
but
done.
lazy. But who among the South Indian dynasts excites you the most, and why?
It's the Pandyas. The Pandyas and Cholas had quite the internecine struggle. It was a civil war down here, with the Cholas gaining the upper hand at certain stages, the Pandyas at other stages. So, we call them the Movendargal in Tamil, the three dynasties, the Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas, and of course you had the Pallavas. So I want to go back, before the Nayak emperors, and get back to ancient history, and probably cover it in its entirety. That will be like several volumes, which is why I'm so reluctant to make that commitment, because each of these empires in itself is a lot of work, and I want to do it together and kind of explore the exchange of power, the struggles between them, the major players of the day. And again, most people know the Chola names, but actually the Pandyas did endure a lot longer than the Cholas. So I would like to, present that. Right now, I just know the basics. I really need to do a lot more research, and hopefully bring it to life someday.
Wonderful. We have Elizabeth Beena Alexander wants to know, Anuja, your books are so well researched, and I find that it is told in a way which makes it relevant to the young, so-called cool generation too. So, in fact, somebody's already replied to that on your behalf, Janani Manoharan, who's saying that's because she's cool, I suppose. They're having a little private conversation of their own. But really, I guess the question is, how do you make it so contemporary?
See, I think I'm an agnostic. So my mom was horrified when I declared as much, but my dad's an agnostic and he was super pleased. So the thing is, I tend not to place the gods on a pedestal.
Right.
And I told you, like when my grandmother told me Krishna's story, I used to think of him as my buddy. So, yeah, because I like the stories more. So I'm always in my head more than the real world, I guess. And I used to see him as, when people say Krishna, for me, he's like an imaginary childhood buddy of mine. I don't see him as God, and I don't celebrate Janmashtami, things like that, which doesn't mean that I don't love him to pieces. So that's my attitude to all the gods. So, I think we are taught not to question the gods, if, from a religious standpoint. Gods can do no wrong. And I would always be that, I used to be somewhat provocative, so I'll always argue. I'll say, what right did Shiva have to incinerate Kamadeva like that? Kamadeva was only trying to help the gentle god of desire, whose weapons are flower-tipped arrows and a bow made of sugarcane. Why would you attack a guy like that? That's like kicking a puppy. So I'd say that, and people will be horrified. Or I'd say Rama. Why the hell did he make Sita do that? She should have just walked out on him.
Yeah.
And people like again be horrified. But see, I'm also very contrary. If people attack Rama, I will say, so what? Not everyone who suspects his wife is Rama. Rama had so many other qualities. Why I'm like that. I'm contrary. I'm argumentative. So that's how I view all these characters, whom I
Right.
love very much. But at the same time, I'm not going to blindly accept all the stuff they do. So I think my whole relationship with mythology is I try to make sense of it. I try to put it down in terms I can live with, which is why I'm not going to just say it's okay for gods to be sexist because they're gods. It's not okay to, do mean things just because you're one of the celestials. So I think that kind of makes it a little bit. I think it puts a different spin on things, and I think people find that refreshing. People keep saying, "I wonder why you're not in more trouble," and I'm like, "Don't jinx me," just because I do respect this material. I love this material, and I like to explore it and make sense of it. On my own terms, basically.
Yeah. I think because it comes out of a place of love rather and learning,
Respect, yes.
and rather than out of ignorance and distaste. So I think that's why people appreciate it. Anita Rao, Anuja, how do you manage your time between writing, dance, looking after the family? Yeah, that's a question for sure.
See, actually, people keep assuming that I work very hard, but I think I know myself better. I feel guilty because honestly, I'd rather just vegetate sometimes and do nothing. So, I'll have those moments when I vegetate, and then I'll feel guilty that I allowed myself to become a bum, and then I'll overcompensate with these intense bouts. But nowadays I'm trying to be more moderate. See, sometimes I'll stay up when I used to, when I was when caught up by the writing frenzy, I used to stay up all night, stuff like that. I think in your 20s you get away with behavior like that. So I'll stay up all night, and my daughter will wake up at 6 in the morning. I'll have her milk ready and I'll just go on. But obviously you can't keep up that pace.
Yeah.
So now I try to be a sensible human being. I try to, be more disciplined when it comes to work, and work steadily instead of, either extreme where you put off stuff to where you kind of like go, like I said, where you go cold turkey from writing and then you leap into it. So now I'm trying to just moderate it and and I really think that 24 hours is enough for all the things you want to do. If you
Right.
make time for these things, and if you love what you do, then it's not work. So yeah, dance and writing and everything, I just, and again, I'm not that hardworking really. So just try to do the things you care about, I guess.
Uh, According to Anita Rao, your ideas probably come when you're vegetating. So that's
Probably,
yeah.
maybe I need that.
Shweta wants to know, Anuja Akka, I know you're a Bharatnatyam dancer. I wanted to ask how much your research in Indian mythology has affected you while portraying these characters.
Actually, I love how that works, how dance and music influence my writing, and
Right.
how my writing influences my performances as a dancer. I love how
Right.
that works because, like I told you, sometimes when you listen to classical music, which
Yeah.
is, I won't focus on the meaning because this is classical Tamil, Telugu, which is or Sanskrit, which is very hard to understand. So
Yeah.
I won't try to focus on the meaning. I try to absorb the essence,
Right.
and that's a lovely experience. It's so liberating because I think I'm a bit of a control freak, and I'm always planning, and it's nice to just surrender and just experience the music and just be in that moment. And the research process helps a lot. It helps me gain a sense of perspective about all these gods and goddesses, and I think that also comes out a bit in my dance. All the research I've put in, I understand them. They're all like my friends. They all live in my head. So I'm very close to them, and I have arguments with them. Which I sound a little nutty when I say that. I'm sure I sound pompous and crazy, but yeah, but that's how it is. They're right there,
Right.
and I like having them there. And it's nice. Art is so beautiful. I think we're so lucky to have it in our lives, and I feel very grateful to have writing, dance, and music in my life. So I just love that so much. And I'm just really, really happy that they're part of my life. And it's a nice weight, it's a stress buster also. And the writing is driving me nuts. The dance is very comforting. And the dancing is killing me. It's nice to switch off and just go back to the writing process. It's lovely.
You do a lot of public performances, Anuja?
Yeah, before the pandemic, we were doing a lot of performances. And we had a lot of performances scheduled as well. So all that's been put on the back burner.
So do you travel a lot for that, or do you do that mostly locally?
See, it's my guru. She's this amazing person called Niranjana, and a lot of us we balance careers, families. We have these college-going kids, students. So we are. We all have to make room for dance. So we kind of like, we'll have parts of the year where we are very, very busy with dance. And then we'll have, that's how it is in art itself as a rule. Yeah. So suddenly I find that I never have more than I can handle. At times it feels like I did take a lot on my plate, but it's never more than I can handle, more than any of us can handle. So. And when I feel like, oh my God, there's a lot, it's again, I'll tell myself it's a blessing. There are lots of dancers out there who are a lot better than me, more talented. But for whatever reason, they would have let it fall by the wayside.
Right.
I'm just happy that it's still there in my life. And
Giridharan Vijay Kumar wants another Tughlaq kind of anti-hero from you.
Yeah, definitely, I love the anti-heroes. I love villains. So history's bad boys exercise a certain charm over me. I'm sure I'll definitely head down that road again.
But he wasn't just a bad boy, he was also a crazy boy.
See, he had his moments. I think in Tughlaq, I explored the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's what makes him fascinating, that he had all that potential. He was so intelligent, and then it all went to hell. So it's just too fascinating, actually.
What fascinated you about Prithviraj Chauhan?
See, Prithviraj Chauhan, I read about him in 3rd grade.
Yeah, like all of us.
Prithviraj and Samyukta.
Yeah.
So, and I fell in love with him right there because he was like so cool, and I loved how he fought his way past an army to get the woman he loves, So I think that was more romantic.
In a way, he's still a loser, isn't he? Because, he lost the battle that mattered, but he won the woman. When you look at it that way.
Again, I see it as tragic. See, sometimes we judge the losers we judge losers very harshly, but whether it's Tughlaq or Prithviraj, I think they did their best with what they had under the circumstances, and that always counts. Not all of us can be Alexander the Great and,
or Akbar.
Yeah, see, it's just sometimes, these things aren't exactly in our control. And even with Prithviraj, you study the material from that period, and it was inevitable. We keep talking about how the British used the divide and rule policy, and they played different factions against each other. But this was something that was so typical of India from ancient times.
Yeah.
There were always, there was always this infighting happening. And even in Prithviraj's time, they really needed to unite against the invader because they knew what had happened with Ghazni, with Mahmud of Ghazni. So history had given them that warning. They needed to set their differences aside and unite. But in India, that's easier said than done. But I think that's okay. I think we Indians, we have flaws and everything. But I think at the end of the day, we do the best we can. And we have survived, we have endured. So I look at it, I have to look at it positively. Otherwise, Prithviraj is going to break my heart. So
you find the same kind of disunity when you look at Padmavati.
Same thing. Exactly. You'll see that pattern from the very beginning. I talked about the Movember in the South also, where, it was like so difficult for people to set their differences aside for a common good. And, we wrestle with that even today. I think it's a miracle that given that particular aspect of our troubled history, it's a miracle that we have survived and endured because, if you look at history again, entire races, entire cultures were destroyed. because people couldn't prevail against the invader. Look at the history of Central America, your Aztec, the Inca, the Mayans. They didn't make it, but there's something I think about something to be said that we endured. I will put it down to factors beyond our control.
Right. There's a question from Shivan Sayas again. When can we expect your next series of narrations on YouTube? Mahabharat was wonderful.
Yeah, so that was again something I tried. I did the Mahabharata, entire Mahabharata on YouTube, over 20 episodes. I'm so happy he appreciated that. Again, I shot for that earlier this year, and we were supposed to shoot a few more episodes, featuring lesser known stories from Indian mythology. But the pandemic happened, and that's been put on hold. When things calm down, if things calm down, hopefully I can get back and shoot some more episodes for the YouTube channel.
Talk a little about Kamdev, because he's again a fascinating character. How did you decide to write on him?
See, at that time, I was Arjuna, and my first book had come out, and I went cold turkey. Actually, I hadn't written anything solid. I hadn't done any research, nothing. So I think my editor called me to, I think he just wanted me to get a move on. So we were just tossing ideas, and he suggested Parashurama and Kamadeva.
Right.
Normally, I identify with anger because I've always had anger management issues. I empathize with people who lose it. And, but for some reason, I was drawn more to Kamadeva than Parashurama. And I think it's again because, as a child, the whole story of Shiva opening his third eye and incinerating Kamadeva, it had, again, because he was such a gentle god. When you see the Devas and Asuras, all of them are wielders of mighty weapons, they are great warriors, violent people, basically. We've always celebrated violence, though.
Absolutely.
We keep saying,
we're supposed to be a non-violent race.
Yeah, we talk about and these violent people are always revered. We worship might and strength. Yeah. She's cool. Even I'm drawn to her. But the thing is,
in fact, I think she really needs you to tell her story.
Yeah, I would love to do it someday. Shakti, I explored Kali and Shakti, but she deserves a book of her own.
Yeah.
So maybe I will.
Yeah, sorry. So let's get back to Kamdev. So what was your thinking there?
He stood out for me. He stood out for me among those celestials, those warlike celestials. Here was this god who was gentle. And, I love how his power is greater than all their power put together. That's the whole thing with Kamadeva. None of us can, withstand desire. The power he wields is such that all must succumb to it, including Shiva, who succeeded in incinerating him. But ultimately, Shiva also admitted that he had been enslaved by the darts of karma. So I thought it was a very beautiful concept that he wielded this power so great. And, it matters when you kind of brighten up the world with things like love and desire. And again, people always assume it's always about sexual gratification. But I think karma was more than that. It was more about, filling life with flavor, of, filling your heart with the gentler emotions.
Right.
I think that's what makes him so special, such a special individual who does deserve to have his story told. And, he again gets dismissed as a lightweight character, someone who didn't really make his mark on a battlefield. But I think he made his mark where it counted. And I really think, we can all use a little of Kamadeva's power in our life.
The other interesting thing, Anuja, is that across cultures, we find so many things that are repetitive. So many elements of, say, Cupid being like Kamdev, we find not just there, but in other gods as well.
Yeah.
I wonder what was happening at that point where were stories being exchanged by travelers, were elements from one culture moving to another culture. Do you see that sort of parallel? Do you see those parallels when you do your research?
Definitely, and I'm fascinated by it because we all like to pretend that we are unique people and we are the
Exactly.
first to discover or write something. We say the wise men of India are the greatest, they knew
Yeah.
everything. The Greeks would talk about their legacy, but I'm always surprised at the overlap. Like you
Yes.
mentioned, Cupid and Kamadeva, and then you have Zeus and Indra, the wielders of the
Exactly.
thunderbolt, who
Absolutely.
also misbehaved with women a lot, both
Yeah.
the wielders of the thunderbolt. And you have Apollo and Surya. You can draw those parallels, and also the great flood. You have the great flood in the Bible. You
Right.
have it in Greek and Roman mythology. Roman mythology is basically an appropriation of Greek. So yeah,
Right.
you have it there. And we have it here also. The very first of Vishnu's avatars is the Matsya avatar, where there's
Exactly.
the great the pralaya, the great flood. So again, I think it's I don't know. Maybe you can look at it whichever way you want. Maybe I'm going to assume there was an interchange of stories and
Yeah.
ideas by the wise men of all ages. And also, I think from different parts of the world, the facts are the same. You reach the same conclusions from
Yeah.
different parts of the world. So it's really lovely. It's very, very fascinating. And also the whole, even in history, it's the same. Alexander also did have a male lover, which
Yeah.
inspired Plato to write about
Exactly.
homosexual love. The
Right.
sacred band of thieves were all homosexual warriors.
Yeah.
So, there are parallels in history and mythology, I guess.
Shweta Senthil Kumar wants to know, to which character in the Mahabharata do you relate your life easily?
I don't know. Mahabharata for me ultimately it will always be from Arjuna's eyes.
Yeah.
It's not a secret. Arjuna is the great, great love of my life, and
How
I've been
many
in.
loves do you have, Anuja? You
Krishna
already.
is my friend. Krishna is my buddy. Okay, he's my childhood imaginary buddy.
Right.
And Arjuna, I've just been insanely in love with him ever since I heard his story. And the fact that he's Krishna's dear, dear friend also
Right.
counted in his favor. And, I've always, I'm very, when it comes to these characters, 1 minute I'm fascinated by this character, then it changes. But Arjuna's been a constant. From when I was knee high to now, somehow I have this massive soft spot for him. So for me, the Mahabharata, the character I love the most, the character I relate to the most, the character, on whom I'm deeply emotionally invested, it would be Arjuna and Krishna. I'm sure, most people expect me to say some female character, protagonist, but it's
But
Arjuna for me.
Anuja, why is that Arjuna doesn't have the same kind of status in our sort of mythology as Ram does? He is also so heroic, and here is someone who goes to war against so much that is ingrained in him because of his honor, because of his family. Why does he somehow not be, why is he somehow not Maryada Purushottam, and why is it Ram?
Ram again, Rama is an incarnation of Vishnu, and we
Right.
worship him. We have temples in his honor, and even in Rama's own lifetime, though he apparently didn't know, he was more human than God,
Right.
unlike Krishna, who was more God than human.
More God than human. Yeah.
Yeah, so Rama, though he himself did not see himself as divinity, in his lifetime itself, Valmiki makes it clear that he was revered and worshipped. Arjuna, on the other hand, took birth as a mortal. He was
Right.
an ancient rishi named Nara reborn. Nara and Narayana took birth as Krishna and Arjuna.
Right.
So, he wasn't, even in his avatar as Nara, he was considered an ancient man, not a god.
Not a God. Okay.
So he's very human. So, in India, of course, sometimes we place our cricket players and our actors, celebs on pedestals. But I think Arjuna, again, you know, uh, since Krishna was there right by his side, Krishna was the god. We have temples devoted to
Yeah.
Krishna. Arjuna was always the man.
Right.
Good for him because I don't know, we tend to tear down our gods from the
Yeah.
pedestal. Ask Rama, we either love them too much or we dash them to the ground. So Arjuna, I
Uh,
think,
and Elizabeth Bina Alexander says also that there's a tragic flaw in Arjuna.
she probably, everyone talks about his pride.
Right.
and about how he screwed over Eklavya and deprived him of his son.
Yeah.
People keep mentioning that when it comes to Arjuna, but again, like I said, he's a mortal who
Right.
tried to be the best version of himself. He
Mhm.
did make mistakes, and I think he done enough in his life to be proud. So many people are arrogant for no reason. Arjuna had the substance to back it up. So I don't see that as a great tragic flaw or anything. And yeah, I will always admit, of course, he wasn't perfect. He was the next best thing. And that's more than good enough for me.
Uttara Radhakrishnan wants to know, Anuja, lovely listening to you talk. How much of Indian culture is politicized today? Everyone has an opinion on something, of course. How does this impact your approach to writing?
See, again, Indian mythology, when you're writing about history or mythology in India, it's a very, very dicey business
Right.
because unlike the Greek and Roman mythology protagonists, those gods aren't worshipped anymore. They belong to the charming literature section. Whereas in India, we continue to worship these gods. It's a very, very sensitive issue. And we have to, if you're going to call a spade, the thing is, a lot of horrible beliefs, lots of yucky narratives have been foisted on us using Indian mythology as an excuse. People always, when they're being sexist or when they're being casteist, they point to Indian mythology, and it's grossly misinterpreted what's there in the ancient texts. So either you'll find the extreme right, the fanatics who embrace this, their flawed misinterpretation of Indian mythology, our religion, tradition, cultures, to perpetuate great evil against women, minorities, lower castes. And then you have the left, they go to the other extreme where they dismiss it outright. That's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which
Right.
isn't exactly very helpful either. So I would say walk the middle path and take the better, leave out the bitter. You
Right.
should be more discerning as a reader. Yes, I get very impatient when it's unnecessarily politicized, but of course it's going to happen. So again, I would suggest educate yourself on your past, make up your mind for yourself. Just because some guy, stands on a podium and tells you that, our culture doesn't accept homosexuality, women have to be in their place, and they'll point to all those patti types from mythology. Yeah, there are lots of brave women. We just talked about Kali, who's a
Yeah.
badass. It
Right.
all belongs to us. So, we should embrace our past, but not to the point where you're going to condone the wrongs that have been perpetuated by it.
Absolutely. There's Ratika Bhubalan who says you're very optimistic in the way you look at characters like Prithviraj and Tughlaq.
Yeah, that's what I said. I have to, because otherwise they break my heart. Even Tughlaq, Prithviraj, as it was pointed out, he did lose a very, very crucial battle, which he
Yes.
could not afford to lose, whichever way you look at it. The thing is, he dropped the ball. Right there, he dropped the ball. And we do not forgive people who do that and easily. But again, when I look at these characters, even Tughlaq, he started out with so much promise and then he screwed it all up. No two ways about it. But I don't like to be judged too harshly personally. I put myself out there, and it's very personal when I write these things. And of course, there are going to be people who troll me and say evil things like, I don't know, you should just quit, you suck that bad, you have that. So I'd rather, so I don't want to do that to somebody else, dismiss their life's work by saying you're a loser. I want to look at their life in its entirety, and if you do that, you will find that every single person, even the so-called villains, there's so much you can learn.
Right.
They did not everyone is 100% black, 100% white. That's the mistake we make. We either worship people of historical characters or the gods. We either revere them to ridiculous levels, or we decide that we hate them, that they
Right.
should be removed from the pages of history. Again, I will say, don't do either. From everyone you can learn something praiseworthy is there about Tughlaq. There was a lot which Prithviraj did well. He was a very, very brave man, a mighty warrior. He fought the odds and he lost. That can happen to any of us. Not all of us can be dazzling successes. It doesn't matter. Our lives, our work, it always counts.
Great.
Even if it's only to ourselves, it matters.
Anuja, almost out of time, but may I quickly ask you to read a small portion of the book? Yes.
7. So to give a little context for the passage I'm going to read, it's about Mohini's relationship with her son Shasta. And I've kind of reinterpreted it a little differently in this book. I'm not giving it away. You guys should pick it up to see
Yes.
what I've done there. I'll just read a little portion from the end where mother and son have a little talk. Because there are abandonment issues here, Mohini did leave him and take off. So
Yeah.
I'll just read a small portion from there. Uh, Shasta was a lot more talkative here than was usual, but it happened and I listened intently as he unburdened himself. Strangely enough, it became clear soon. Learning the truth about who I was helped. I wasn't angry or confused anymore. It helps that I was shown my true purpose as well. My father, here we're talking about Rajashekara, the king in Kerala. My father wanted me to be the king of kings, to conquer the 3 worlds and establish a golden age of peace, prosperity, and plenty. The masculine side of me thrilled at the prospect, but my feminine nature balked. In the end, the choice was simple. It had fallen to me to work with the like-minded, to create a peaceful corner of the 3 worlds for all those who were not welcome anywhere. For those who had been written out of the stories and left to die long before they stopped breathing. Helping them a little helped me a lot, and I'm happy. I was happy for him too. We walked over to the border between the existing worlds and the universe that lay beyond, which he had finally learned to straddle, and looked over at the little kingdom that had let him go. King Rajashekara had never forgiven himself for succumbing to his wife's blandishments and had devoted his last years to building an enduring monument to his beloved Shasta's memory. He hired poets, painters, artists, scribes, musicians, and sculptors to record the best stories about him and preserve it in his monument to posterity. They conjured up the stories from what they were told and what they weren't. The child born of the union of Shiva and Mohini for the express purpose of destroying the wife of the buffalo demon to neutralize a boon she had won from Brahma. And Shasta or Ayappa, born to 2 fathers as he came to be known, had prevailed. Magnanimous and compassionate, he bought tiger's milk for the ailing queen who had conspired to kill him in order to seat her own son on the throne. A mighty warrior who had saved them from the demonic she-buffalo, he also guarded the coast against pirates and other hostile forces before retiring to the abode of celestials. Indra was threatened by his prowess and put up wily Narada into telling him about the unusual nature of his birth. Embarrassed, Ayappa had sworn to remain celibate and shun the company of women after his unhappy experiences with his birth mother and stepmother. Therefore, only male devotees would be welcome at the wondrous abode built by his father at Sabarimala. It is quite a story, Mohini remarked. I am told Parashurama of the fiery axe personally carved the idol that has been placed in the sanctum sanctorum. Father insisted on doing it. He shrugged. Of course, I intend to visit to make him happy, but I'm not going to remain locked up in an altar, even if it is the holiest of the holies. Those who want to make my acquaintance can always find me if they look long enough for a safe little haven tucked away on the outskirts of the spiteful society they keep. Have I ever told you that I'm really proud of you? An enchantress is no mother, and yet I will end it there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anuja. It was so wonderful talking to you. Yeah, Pavan, over
Yeah,
to
ma'am.
you.
Thank you so
it was
much.
most enlightening.
Oh, it
Thank
was fantastic. I mean,
Thanks
thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.
No,
Kaveree,
ma'am,
thanks so much.
I'm
Pavan,
telling
thank you.
It was fantastic, Anuja. Thank you so much, you and Kaveree ma'am. You know, I mean, I think some of the insights were spectacular, and I think a lot of simplifying has happened. You know, I mean, I think you are the second author after Devdutt, I believe, who has tried to demystify the mythology. You know, try to make it more relevant and easier for people of the new generation to understand and follow. And like you said, we should own it. We should honor it. We should not be making these kind of tall statements without even understanding what's behind our past. And fantastic. I personally love the Krishna analogy of being respectful to women. I think a lot of men should learn not just the naughty part, but the respectful part as well. Fantastic.
Thank you so
And,
much. This was so much fun. Kaveri, thanks so much. You're the best.
Thank you.
Really loved talking.
Thank you so much.
A very, very big thank you to our entire audience. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. This is being fed live on Facebook as well. And this will be going live, or this will be also put on our YouTube channel, Tiffin Talks. Till then, till we meet next, it's goodbye and good evening. Thank you so much.
You so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.